The Assad family's 53-year hold on power in Syria is looking vulnerable tonight in the face of a lightning rebel assault that's now threatening the strategic city of Homs. This week's sudden resurgence of fighting, with the jihadi-led insurgents taking first Aleppo, then Hama, seems to have blindsided both the Assad regime and its main backers, Russia and Iran. Tonight, tens of thousands of people are said to be fleeing Homs, with rebel forces camped less than 10 kilometres away. If Homs falls, the next city in the rebels' sights, the capital, Damascus. It's the deadliest violence in Syria since the front line stagnated 4 years ago, with repercussions across the Middle East and beyond.
Suddenly, there seems no stopping Syria's rebels. Their fighters streamed south today towards Damascus. There has been little to stand in their way. Syria's defense minister claimed the army's rout was a tactical retreat. But the 50-year grip on power of the Assad family feels fragile. Here, a statue of the president's father and predecessor is hauled down. His head dragged through the streets of Hama, where 40 years ago his forces butchered tens of thousands after a failed uprising. Revenge has been a long time coming. It's a great joy, says this woman, something we've waited for. Syria is ours. Where is Assad and his gang now, asked this man. Between the rebels and the capital lies the city of Homs. In panic, thousands of citizens jam the roads trying to escape. It is hardly a vote of confidence in the regime's future.
The rebel forces are better armed, better organised and more united than ever, led by the Islamist militants Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, whose roots lie in al-Qaeda. Now, Assad has survived so long only with the help of Russia, which is now preoccupied in Ukraine, and Iranian-backed Hezbollah, weakened by war in Lebanon. In their absence, much of the Syrian army seems to have melted away. In a surprise attack last week, the rebels captured Syria's second city, Aleppo, in just 72 hours. They then pushed south and by Thursday took Hama, a city that's never fallen in 13 years of fighting. Now they're speeding towards Homs, and victory there would open the road to Damascus and cut off the regime's heartland around Latakia. And that could spell the end of Assad.
Ability of the regime to survive will be definitely reduced significantly because of those military means, and Assad's ability to then mobilize resources, especially domestically, will become harder.
In Aleppo, soldiers who abandoned Assad's army are now signing up for the rebels, who have also won the explicit support of Turkey, Syria's powerful northern neighbor.
The target is, of course, Damascus. This march of the opponents continues as of now. Of course, I will say that our wish is that this march in Syria continues without any accidents or hardship.
The Islamists are courting Washington too. Their leader, designated a terrorist by the US, spoke to American television to present a moderate message.
This event has positive repercussions globally because under the regime's rule, Syria became a source of concern and trouble for everyone. Stabilizing Syria will bring many people back.
Protests are spreading. In a town called Dera, where the uprising and the bloodshed began more than a decade ago, they've lost their fear of the regime. Assad may yet survive, but everywhere his forces are in retreat. John Ray, News at 10.
In a moment, we'll get reaction from Robert in Washington, but first to John in Tel Aviv. John, where does this go next and where does it end?
Romilly, the walls are closing in on Assad and his regime fairly quickly. I think one of the things you'll have noticed about the pictures coming out of Syria over the last 8 or 9 days is that there are very few images of actual fighting, which suggests to me that the regime soldiers are cutting and running. Well, if the regime is to have any chance of surviving this, it's going to have to fight for Homs, which is strategic not only because it's just 100 miles north of Damascus. It lies at a crossroads where the road to Damascus and the road to the coast meet. The coast is the regime's stronghold. It's also where the Russian bases are. If the rebels take Homs, then Damascus will be cut off and in danger of being surrounded. What should the Western powers make of all this, Romilly? Well, on the one hand, they'll be glad to see Russian and Iranian influence on the wane in this region, but they're finding it difficult to take a side because the choice is between Assad, a brutal dictator, and HTS, an Islamist group that is actually a proscribed terrorist organization. I think what the Western powers can agree on is the danger of a humanitarian crisis. This war has already claimed 500,000 lives and created something like 13 million displaced people and refugees. We know in the UK these days there's great consternation about the small boats coming over the channel. Well, the original small boats brought Syrians into Europe via the Greek islands, a migration that led to political turmoil, the rise of the right in Germany and France and other places. So what happens in Syria tends not to stay in Syria, which is why all this matters.
And let's turn to Robert. Washington will no doubt be watching this, yet more global instability, and just as an unpredictable president prepares to return to the White House.
That is certainly true. Caution the watchword here, as it is in European capitals, with the added anxiety, Romilly, that don't forget there are 900 American troops actually serving and on duty in northeastern Syria, battling the remnants of the Islamic State. I think, as John said, certainly the United States government would welcome Iranian influence in Syria being eviscerated. They would welcome Russian troops being forced to leave Syria as well, and they would shed no tears over the demise of the Assad regime. But at the same time, there's real concern about how Mohammed al-Jolani is projecting himself. Is he truly a pragmatist like he is now saying? Remember, he is the leader of a rebel coalition that is regarded here as a terrorist group. Indeed, al-Jolani's got a $10 million bounty on his head. So America can't easily embrace him. And remember, here in Washington, decision makers remember the fiasco of how the US embraced the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, only to find that group had morphed into al-Qaeda. So there's a long history of catastrophic appraisals of Islamist rebel groups. And for the Trump administration, this is especially problematic. They're coming into power with their America First agenda, and yet suddenly finding all of that could be diverted by the maelstrom crossing the Middle East.